Hello, and welcome to another edition of Cheers PA Beer Talk. I am your host, Mike Lintel. As always, we are joined by some of the best and most interesting and exceptional stories that we have going on here in the state of Pennsylvania within the brewing community. And today is another one that I'm really excited to get into. We are joined by Kelly Weiss, who is the co-owner of Perkiomen Valley Brewery in Green Lane, PA, affectionately called the Little Brewery in a Bank. And typically we start our show with the beer that made you want to get into brewing and what maybe the one that sparked that interest to open a brewery. And for you, I know your story is a little different. And I'm really excited to get into that. But is there a beer that predates the passion of why you opened Percoman Valley that got you into craft beer? And thank you again for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me. And I'm going to jump right into the beer. So that's twofold for me. Like there's a different beer that got me interested in craft beer. And there's a beer that sparked this whole thing. So the beer that got me interested in beer, other than, what at the time my dad was bringing into the house routinely, was that we had a German restaurant open right up the road from us. Authentic. They were right from Germany. So this is going back to my teen years, and I was that kid that was like doing the pop-up parties while your mom and dad went out of the house, right?
Perfect. Hey, you got to learn and start somewhere. Absolutely.
And if it wasn't at my house, it was at somebody else's house. And I said many years later to my mom, you had to know that I was throwing a party. Like I said, we were kind of in a rural area, and it was even more rural then. So there wasn't a lot to do around. And I said, you had to know I was having a party. Why'd you let me do it? And she says, because my house was spotless after you guys cleaned everything up so you wouldn't know. So that was pretty brilliant on my mom's part. Kudos to her.
Absolutely. Yeah. You got to have a plan. Honestly, that's where I learned to do drywall the first time, is from one of those party incidents at a friend's house. The choices are you get caught or you better fix it and make it look nice. And thankfully someone was there to teach us how to fix a hole in drywall.
See,
not my house, thankfully.
All the things that start with a party, Yeah. I don't know if we should be saying, hey, parents, let your kids party, but some good things can come out of it sometimes. But
yeah, absolutely.
The beers from the German restaurant, Klaus was introducing us to all the really good beers. And so St. Augustiner Dark was my beer that I would bring to the parties. I'm like, I'm not drinking that other stuff. This is the one that I want to drink. So I'd bring a case, because I'm nice and I want to share with others.
Yeah.
But really that got us interested. And then Tom was also interested in beer at the time. He was more, it was like the Labatt's and the Moosehead and stuff as young teenagers. And then he was in the Navy, and we couldn't afford any of that because we were flat broke. And so back to Bush we went, and Budweiser for a stint. And but then we slowly started, as our lives started, we became a family, and our lives started to we had more, I don't want to say expendable money, because with our life we never have really truly expendable money, but where we could treat ourselves, we started getting back into the craft beer. And so the beer that really is kind of like one of our beacons, it's so crazy, is I screwed up Tom's 40th birthday pretty badly, not intentionally. I thought he would enjoy doing something, and he didn't really enjoy that. So I owed him a redo. And the redo was when we went out to Trogs. And it was, and I just went online and I booked the hotel and I booked a tour. And here it was the second to the last tour when they were closing their Harrisburg location.
Wow.
So one brother took one group, one brother took the other group. So Chris was giving us one of the final tours and the cheer at the end of the thing. We were having a great time, so we drank a lot of Troganator, a lot, celebrating his birthday. And then we went back for the tour, and there were stacks of Mad Elf, which happens to be, to this day, Troganator and Mad Elf are two of Tom's favorite beers. I enjoy them quite a lot, too.
Well,
And we saw the
they're
stacks of,
exceptional.
yeah. And we saw the
Yeah.
stacks of Mad Elf. And Tom, who is not this kind of guy, he's a very measured, metered kind of guy. Like his day job is a product manager. So that's what he does. He's just kind of wired for that. And he bent down and whispered in my ear, "We're going to do this someday." And
Really?
I was like, what? Keep like going to breweries? That's cool. I'm in, right? Like our life was getting a little bit more settled down that we could do that. And he goes, "No, we're going to have a brewery someday," which was news to me. And also quite like, what are you talking about? Because at that juncture, neither he or myself had brewed beer. Nothing. Like we had no experience whatsoever with it.
Wow.
But he really, really, really enjoyed that trip. And so I thought, well, and brought it up again. I thought, well, if he really wants to explore this further, I'm going to get him brewing classes, because I thought for sure, like I knew enough to know that brewing takes a long time, right? So, but I didn't know if he knew how long brewing took. So I got him classes, and we are not the couple who texts each other throughout the day. Like we're all busy doing all different kinds of things. So it's rare that we text each other. And all through that class, he's like, "This is so cool. Look at this. This is so cool. Look at," and I'm like, "Oh no, what did I do?" But that was actually the start of the whole thing. And then we just kept building on. I'm like, okay, well, if you like that, let's, he was brewing. I was not. I was still doing, my two sons at that point were still in school. So I was still very involved with that as a special education advocate and all the stuff that comes with that and with our family. And Tom was starting to brew, begging me to brew with him. And I kept politely declining and sending him to more classes to keep him.
Did you finally run out of classes? And so like, that's where the rubber hit the road.
So actually, no, he was actually mid one of his classes. And sadly, his mom passed away.
Oh no!
And he was very close to his mom, and she passed away in February. And of course, that just knocks you off your. Oops, I have somebody texting me. Sorry about that. That just knocks you off your trajectory, for a while. And then the very first time he got back to brewing, he said, "I really want you to brew with me this time." And I'm like, okay, absolutely. I'll do it. I said, but just so you know, I'm picking the beer.
Good choice.
So yeah, so it was Mother's Day of 2014 was the first time that I ever brewed. And we brewed our St. Dymphna Belgian triple, because that's what I wanted to go out. And he's like, well, so he was doing all these things to kind of make it easy for me, which was really kind of him. But I'm like, listen, if I cook, so I've been cooking since I've been in 6th grade. Yeah. I'm like, if I'm going to do it, I want to be full on. I want to do it. So that was our first one. We came out the gate. And interesting, it's on our taps right now too.
Well, it's a good time of year to have one of those. I'm imagining there's a large malt body going on with some nice caramel and the right balance of sweet and not overly powering any alcohol. I'm sure it's quite balanced and delightful.
This one, I got to say, came in a little. So Tom brewed it. Just so you know, Tom brewed it. Came in a little higher because the reason we did this batch was we push some of it into our Christmas ale to round it out. So we do a blend with our Christmas ale. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So this one's a little. This one's got a little something to it.
In your opinion, and have you guys talked? Do you think it'll mellow out with a little bit of time as those tend to, or do you think that is the structure of the final beer?
That for the Belgian triple?
Yeah, for where it's at right now, with it being a little.
It will not last long. It's a smaller batch because we push a lot of it into our Christmas beer. So it won't last long. It won't get time to mellow out. And really, it doesn't taste. We get that a lot with our beers, is
Yeah.
that they don't taste high ABV. They taste very smooth, very
Yeah.
balanced. So we have to warn people and not to knock them back too hard. Like, take your time with them.
But in
And this,
sorry.
yeah. So this Belgian triple is, we tend to, getting into the technical piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
I am pretty, and this is just my own palate. I like to pull the fruity esters forward rather than, so we tend to ferment it. I don't want to say low, but we tend to ferment it at a lower temperature versus what it can go, where it starts throwing off like the ripe bananas and that
Mm-hmm.
kind of a flavor profile. And I'm I'm not a ripe banana person, so
Yeah. Well, you should make the beer that you like. I mean, that's the beauty of brewing, and like
right.
that scale of where you can ferment it and all the different intricacies the brewer
Yeah.
controls.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's an easy drinker. Actually, I call that one, that's my fond one. We named it Saint Dymphna. And people are like, first of all, who's, and they try to pronounce the name and they usually can't. So we have to tell them this story. I said, she's the patron saint of mental health. And the reason I did it was because that very first brew day went to complete hell in a handbasket mid brew.
Oh no. And
And
then there were a lot of prayers and
it was my neighbors. So this will be a nice segue into like why we do our brewery. But our neighbor unexpectedly came over to see what we were doing. So he like tools over in his fancy schmancy golf cart, and my dog was not expecting it. So the dog went completely crazy and barking really loudly, which scared Jonah. So Jonah had a complete meltdown. And then Noah had a complete meltdown. And it was, yep. And that's how it got its name. Because we had to pull everybody back together.
Oh my.
We had to shut down the brew day, pull everybody back together, which took about an hour or so. And then we got back going with our brew day, because that's what we do with life. If we fall down, we get back up.
It's a true testament and really indicative of who you and Tom are, that's how the first time that you would actually brew together would be on a Mother's Day, which typically is one where, mom's got her feet up and he's like, hey, I want you to go do essentially hot custodian work for 6 or 7 hours with me. Because that's what brewing is. And like people have this vision of what a brewery and a brewer is. I'm like, nah, I mean, it's janitor work. It's really like, I enjoy it because at the end of the day, I don't have a dirty mop bucket and nothing else. I mean, there's a nice Pilsner waiting for me or something, but yeah, it's not as glamorous.
And that day, like, so like when all this that has been the past 2 years with COVID, people are like, people are like, oh my gosh. And super sincere. How are you doing? This must be so hard. And I'm like, we've been training for this our whole entire life. We got this.
Yeah, everyone finally caught up to your speed, honestly. The way that, like, I'm sure, like, how much planning that goes into your life and how much you have to forethought and how fast things can change and just all of the, like, you're constantly living in a shower of variables is my imagination of how you've lived your life with children. And you are, I think, the perfect person to bring, you and Tom, to bring this concept of a brewery providing fair and decent work to people that are so underemployed, even in the workforce, or just flat out unemployed because the workforce has not found a way to wrap their head around strengths and only seeing what they consider weaknesses. And I think that now, with as much flux as we have, and you maybe agree, this is the time for big and bold changes in all areas. So seeing someone like you and Tom and creating this environment and having the success, not just within your geographic community, but just like your community as a whole and becoming almost a beacon. It's so inspirational. Can you share some of the story of kind of what brought you to opening the brewery and what your real passion is when it comes to Percomen Valley?
Right. So Perkiomen Valley Brewery. So interesting. Let me back up even before our kids came into the world. Is that I go back to the fact that my mom, one of her best friends, she had surgery in her 30s. She had a tumor, a spinal tumor, and when she had surgery, she basically it didn't work how they thought it was going to work. and she basically was a quadriplegic for the rest of her life. She definitely had use of her muscles if she really hyper focused on her muscles. But the second, like, her attention was pulled away, for instance, if she was holding a spoon, basically either one hand or two-handed, if her attention was pulled away, the spoon would fall right out of her hand. So just having mom would go once a week. I thought it's such an incredible story, because my mom would go once a week to be part of her team. And she did that for the entire time Melanie was alive. She would go once a week to help exercise her, to keep her muscles tone and not get rigid, and, just help do things around the house, like decorate her house for the holidays and things like that. So I grew up with that. And I grew up watching this young couple with young kids go from being active. They were the pastor and his wife from our church, and they were very, very active. And I went from seeing them being very, very active all the time to they could barely even get in the door of some of the places that were important to them, including the church, that he was pastor at, right? So, and that's in the 70s. But I guess that made a bigger imprint on me than I ever really realized. Like, that was almost like the stage being set. And then when my sons come into the picture, and both Noah and Jonah are on the autism spectrum, they're adults now. It was hard. I mean, there's no way of getting around it or sugarcoating it, that there's a lot that comes with it, right? So I needed to learn how to parent differently. I need to learn how to communicate differently. Noah couldn't even imitate a sound until he was 5, but he was reading when he was 3. So we were communicating through written words. It was a full-on learning experience, full-on, for Tom and I. And we were very much the student. And as weird as it sounds, we're lucky, because we didn't just get the front seat for our own kids and our own family. We met families with other kids that were coming into this world born differently. And then you had to figure out, well, how are you going to navigate this world? And not only how are you going to navigate this world, but also tandem, how are you going to make this world a better place for your kid and kids like that, and other individuals who, whether they're born with their disability or they acquire one, right? So then I'm going to really give you the abbreviated version. So I did a whole bunch of learning, and not just, learning about my family. To help Noah, I went to school to be a reading instruction specialist, but I also became a special education advocate, and learning all these different moving parts and all these different moving systems, which are clunky and slow. Good Lord, are they slow for making any changes, right? So it got to a point where you just get frustrated, because you're like, man, it just shouldn't be this hard. It shouldn't be this hard to impart this kind of care and knowledge. Like, all you got to do is care. All you got to do is step up. Nobody's asking you to do all the things that I did, but show some level of investment. And if for anything else, it's for the fact that this will be you someday, right? If you're lucky enough to live long enough, I'm wearing glasses. Your eyes are going to get worse. Your hearing's going to get worse. Your mobility is likely going to get worse. Like, so.
Honestly, that was one of my hopes early on in the pandemic, when we saw like the slightest shed of empathy starting to emerge among humanity. I was like, maybe we can find a thing that we can find the good and start to care a little bit more about one another. I mean, we have the best medicine and the best technology that, civilization has ever had that we know of. And here we are fighting over the most asinine things. And it's just like, I heard that story about how much money you spent for your changing table so that you could have a full-size changing table for your friends that have, adult children with toileting needs. And like, it makes so much sense that there should be some grant or some support around something as specified, niche as that. How many people are really going to take advantage of that? But having it there is just, it just seems to make sense that we should care a little bit more in the construct.
The moms who come in with their little kiddos, and let me tell you, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of COVID babies. I'm like, oh, a lot of people were bored.
Yeah, I have an 11-month-old currently.
Oh, the moms and dads are like, this is the most amazing changing table, because we have one that can go up and down with the push of a button, and they're like, I can put my bag on the table and not have to hang it someplace or scrounge around for it on the floor. So they're super excited about it too. And like, when people ask about it, I get to tell them why, right? Yeah. So, and they're like, oh, so your sons have that need. I'm like, no. But what we wanted to do for our brewery is, there's nothing that feels quite as overwhelming. I'm trying to find the words. To me, it's very overwhelming and very, it's like, I can't even put words to the feeling, but when we go into an environment that somebody thought about us before we even came, right?
You're being seen for the first time. And it's so, and there are so many people that are marginalized, and like, that feeling can transcend different paths, but to go somewhere where you are seen as not just like, hey, we have one spot out front, or or the door swings open, like the details, like, how much someone cared to take it to that level. I can't even imagine. That's what you're trying to put into words. I can't even imagine that feeling. And you, who's felt that, are struggling for the words because it's so rare and so overwhelming. I'm seeing.
It is. And it's I think the overwhelming thing comes, like, there's times where you crumble and you like are choking back the tears, because it's so much of our life is pulling the weight of the 85% and hoping that somebody kicks in 15%. We feel grateful when that happens. But when somebody goes even further, like you said, you just don't know what to do with it. And it's such a relief, right? So then when you get that relief, I don't know about anybody else, but when I get that relief, I become a blubbering, crying mess.
Well, I think about how much you're probably holding back just on a regular, like the things that you have to suppress just so you can continue to do. And something like that blindsides you with just sheer joy and just, how could you possibly hold it back?
Because you're ready and you're braced for all the bad stuff. You've been doing that your whole entire life. And then this goodness comes out of like nowhere and corks you with a curveball, and you don't know what to do with it, right? Like, you're just like, and thank you is about all you can muster. And it feels so little to just say thank you. But so we just want to put this voice out there where we're really candid. We're candid on our social media about things. And it's really just to get people to understand this is every community, right? So if a little tiny brewery in Green Lane, PA, which is the tiniest town in all of Montgomery County, can manage to do it, there's a lot more. I'm not saying maybe everybody can do it, but there's a lot more people who can do it, right? And it's not like pointing fingers at anybody, like shaming or anything like that. It's, they often just don't know, right? Because they haven't had exposure. So we're here. We're here to talk to.
Yeah, I love what I was going to say. I love your social media follow for that exact reason, because I find it to be informative, but also just so positive. Like, there's never any, even the things that have happened to you. Like, I think about the hurricane that came through and the flooding, like all the things that just in the time that I've come across your feed, it's just tremendous.
It's pretty ridiculous, isn't it?
That you take on a daily basis, and just keep rolling. It's positivity always. It's like the Ted Lasso of Pennsylvania brewery follows. It's so inspirational. And I am so excited that we were able to bring you along and have this conversation. And I know it was a path to get here for us both, but it's so important to me that your story gets out as many times as it possibly can, because you're not trying to proselytize. You're just living your life in a way that's positive, forward facing. And that's extremely challenging without all the other things that you've taken on as a small business owner, as a parent, as an advocate. It's just, you're so inspirational. And so I love the blueprint and the model that you've created as something that people can look at. And then how can we adopt some of these principles into what we do, our industry, our line of work, whatever it is. And I'm so hopeful that the kindness and support that's come around, your brewery in such a short time in a pandemic, that, this could possibly be something that Pennsylvania can get behind, is like, look at this, like championing an industry as we look at evolving changes within industries and the way that people work and how they live. It's just, it's so important that places like your brewery exist to be a bastion of possibility.
Right. So my biggest thing is always like, we're accessible. So if anybody's watching this, we're accessible. Not just the brewery, but Tom and I are accessible. He'll put it into my thing, because he'll say she's the one with all the ideas, but he does too. But I'm the one who chats about this part. I just have a natural love of like designing spaces anyway, right? So I'm not the person who can put it on paper. We have a friend we know that was an architect, and he specialized in ADA. So we would sit down with him and we just hash out different things. And even with ADA, like some of the things that like people thinking about a build out can think of right away is ADA is okay. I mean, but face it, that was 1970 when all that happened, right? So we've learned a lot since then.
A rule of mine is don't do anything the way they did it in the 70s unless you absolutely have to.
Right? Unless you're going for that cool 70s vibe, with an updated thing. But so for instance, if you're doing a build out, make your doors even a little bigger than ADA asks for. And the reason why is because anybody using some kind of mobility device, whether it's a wheelchair or a walker, they're going through that door, you're scraping your knuckles, man. It's still really tight fit. And then if you have somebody who is a bigger person and needs a bigger wheelchair, they're never going to be able to get in your door. So you want to think about that. Other things that you can do is have like a variety of seating options, right? So a lot of times people go in and they just buy all their tables and chairs from one place and they all look alike. You want to do a variety of seating things. We have some benches and we have different kinds of chairs. And that way people can when we're not full, they can pick where they want to seat and what kind of seating is more comfortable. We just had the other day, we had some customers in and they asked to switch seats because she was having a back issue. So she wanted something with, that helped her back. And it's great seeing another table say, oh yeah. And that's what we want to have. A community. They don't know each other, but it was a community coming here. You can have ours, right? And that's exactly what you want to see happening. Because again, this is every town. When we were doing our business plan, we went before. It was great. We used SCORE. I put a plug out there for SCORE all the time. We have great mentors. And the one mentor, again, he did not have this experience as his background. His experience was something different. And so when we were running our original business plan he's a pretty forthright guy. He's pretty, not pretty. He's a very forthright guy. He came in and he said, you need to dial the disability thing back. Yeah, I made that same face.
Oh man, I want to see what Tom's face would have looked like in that situation, because he knew what was coming.
No. Tom just sits back, and that's when he is about to get the popcorn and a beer and say,
"That's what I'm saying."
I'm going to just sit back and watch the show.
Oh man!
And so this mentor, who we never met before, this one, he says, "I look like I pissed you off." I said, "You think?" And he goes, well, why are you mad? And I said, 1 in 4. And he's like, what? I said, 1 in 4. I said, there are 1 in 4 people with a disability. I said, and that's why we're doing this. I said, listen, I said, it's just bad business not to plan for that one person. I said, because it's not just planning for that one person. It's planning for all the family and friends who love that one person. I said, go ahead, leave the revenue on the other side of the door of your business. I'm going to open mine.
I love that. Whoa.
And he's like, I don't know. So the interesting thing was, and this is pre-COVID, we were going for an SBA 504 loan. And at that juncture, so you have a team of people that kind of circle you to help you develop this plan and get it submitted to SBA. And she said, hey, I'm going to let you know that like right about now, it's running at about anywhere from 5 to 14 days, to get some feedback from them. She goes, and sometimes they come back and they ask you for more information. So I just don't want you to get like too worried or nervous. This is the norm. And I said, okay, thanks for letting us know. She let me know when she submitted it. So she submitted it about an hour later. And she calls me like, I don't know. I want to say it was like right after lunch. And I said, oh my God, they need more information. She goes, Kelly, you will not believe this. They approved you.
Wow.
And I was like, yes.
But again, I'm telling you, what you have created, and because it's so authentic and true to who you and Tom are, like there's so much hope and promise around it. And I love the fact that you two have created an environment that others are comfortable and the word is getting out there, and the reputation and the expectation of the place. You have guests that are sharing chairs in a pandemic. No one's talking to anyone table to table, and you've got people like, it's just, it's wonderful what you've created as the ground rules of, if you want to be here, be a decent human. We're here for everyone. Everyone means everyone, that's not 75%, 30%. Like you can't start parsing it out. Like it's for all. Right.
Yeah. About the only thing that will get you your comeuppance around here, and I've only had to ever escort one person out the door, is if you're intentionally being a jerk. And then it comes with the thing, listen, usually comes with the thing of, listen, you can come back when you learn how to behave better, right? Because everybody makes mistakes sometimes. But so back in my special education advocacy days, I'm going to forget his name. Patrick, I'm going to forget what his last name is, but he did this big presentation and somebody asked, about, this is in a school setting, but about, kids getting suspended. And he said, listen, he says, kids can earn their way out of school for any number of reasons, right? So something happens, you still have to stay in the parameters of laws because there's certain things that apply to kids with receiving special education services. But he said, but just because you earn your way out doesn't mean that it's a one-way road. Right? He says, don't ever think about it. He goes, you have to build in things that give somebody an opportunity to earn their way back in as well, because people should always have an opportunity to learn and learn new things and learn how to be better than they were the day before. So I always, even when things, and we, knock wood, we have great customers, right? So it's rare that I would even have to step to the plate for something. Sometimes the customers are doing that for us, which is really great. Like that's building that community again. But I always try to keep that in mind, because that's a hard thing when somebody hurts you, and especially if at the time they're hurting you, it felt very intentional. It's hard not to just point to the door and say, let it hit you on the ass on the way out and stay on that side. But, you gotta give people a break. People make mistakes. If it's a pattern of behavior, then it's like, we're not the place for you. Well, because we just have a safe environment for people, and that's what we expect.
That's part of having a safe environment, is you have to You have to maintain that. So when it's like you said, someone intentionally being a jerk and trying to disrupt that balance, that's when you have to maintain it. Otherwise, civility is not that difficult to maintain, even when you disagree with someone. And I think that having spaces that encourage that and, teaching people to engage that way and having some civility in the way the engagement happens, that's the skills that we're drastically missing within society, in my opinion. So I'm so thrilled to find places that exist like that, and that people like you that are doing important work, like holding people accountable and just being a wonderful advocate. Right. So if you could help me, because I heard that I butchered the name and I've been practicing for a week and a half on, is it Perkiomen?
Perkiomen.
Perkiomen
Valley Brewery. It's the hardest name. And listen, just so people know, I didn't choose that name.
Good Lord. It's actually like the school district there. Yes, I was, because I was like trying to find pronouncers, or like, where did this come from? Why did you choose this name?
So we looked in our area. Our area has a very rich history of immigrants from Germany that came, a number of different areas, but Germany predominantly, that came and founded this area. So Green Lane itself used to be an iron plantation, meaning it had a big giant iron forge that was creating things. It also was known for a lot of its mills and gunpowder mills and stuff on some of the creeks that are in the surrounding areas. So it was a really interesting, our little town, little teeny tiny Green Lane in Somebody Town, were very wealthy at one point. With all this industry that they had. Mm-hmm. So like, it was like really a cool, not a cool thing, but it was a cool thing to go in and dig into that history and find out like if you were a wealthy, prosperous area, you usually had like a clockmaker in town. And not all towns obviously had clockmakers. Mm-hmm. And here in our little town, we had 3. But at the same time, I was trying to find a brewery because they're German immigrants. One would think there'd be breweries, right? There was one. And it was Perkiomen Valley Brewery, but it came later. It came in the 1800s, late 1800s. And then it was closed down for Prohibition and never came back. And I'm like, seriously? There was only one. We wanted to find the history. So then we just dug into it a little bit more and found out that we had the ability to use that name. So we thought it would just be a cool thing, other than the fact that it's a tongue twister and really hard to say and really a bugger to put on logos. So it's like at some juncture, we're trying to train people to just say PVB, although we're pretty sure there's another PVB brewery, but we're sticking to Green Lane. We're not going big, so we're sticking with that.
Well, if you don't get mad, I'm going to refer to it as the Perky Valley Brewery because it just seems to fit both the mood and the environment. It's such a warm and welcoming space. You should check it out. Kelly, I can't thank you enough for your time today. It's been I wish we had more time, but it's a story that I continue to look forward to hearing over and over again because the work that you're doing is truly wonderful. And please, I don't have to tell you to keep it up. I know you're going to. I'm just excited. Like, I'm Tom at this point. I've got the popcorn and I'm just sitting back and I get to watch. So I appreciate you gracing our little show with your presence. And thank you so much. Check it out. Where can people find you and the brewery on social media? And where's the best place to stay up to date on upcoming events and beer releases?
So Facebook and Instagram, look for Perkiomen Valley Brewery. It's the whole shebang. I usually post what is coming up for that weekend on a Monday or Tuesday. Our hours are Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 to 9 p.m., Saturdays 12 to 6, Sunday 12 to 5. And then in the springtime, when things start opening back up, the first Saturday of every month, we have a maker's market. Mm-hmm. It's another way of us trying to expand opportunities to other local businesses to come on in here. So it's a good time.
I love it. The diversity of the things that are offered at your market really makes it quite unique and special. So I'm glad you put a plug in for that. Keep an eye out for that this spring. For Cheers PA, I'm Mike Lintel. Kelly Weiss, thank you so much. We will see you again next time. Cheers PA.
All right. Bye.